Hi, good afternoon. My name's Joe Uno. I'm the principal of J. Uno and Associates. We're celebrating our 30th year as cost estimators this year. And we are so proud to be sponsors of Smps, and we're so proud of Rachel, our chapter chair, our president here. Yay, Rachel. We're here this afternoon with Lisa Keohakalole Shower from North Point Communications, and she's going to talk to us today about leadership for tomorrow. Just real quick, let's silence our phones and make sure that at the end of the session you fill out your evaluation form. All right? And that's it. Aloha, Lisa.
Can everybody hear me okay? Aloha mai no ka ko apau. Oau, Lisa, kia aloha nui, kia hokaloli, shower. There's a couple of you that know the story behind my journey to my Hawaiian culture, and I'm so excited to be here today with you. We have about an hour. We have some workshop work to do together. Not everybody has all of the materials, so you might have to share and make a new friend, but there is chocolate for everyone. So please feel free to help yourself. The after lunchtime slot is sometimes a little difficult. So I wanted to talk a little bit about my background so that you know a little bit more about me and where I have been and what I've done. So over the last couple decades, I have been in the construction, home building, construction management, land surveying, and civil engineering business. So I started as a lobbyist for the Home Builders Association and fell into an engineering firm where the idea of political science and public relations meant marketing and business development and all other duties assigned. So I have been in many of your shoes where I have written proposals in Word, which I know some of you are probably horrified to hear that we had to do proposals in Word, but it was in an attempt to convince the civil engineering partners that spending money to buy Adobe was worthwhile. So I have stayed late to finish a proposal while partners have gone home. I have sat around the table and not at the table as a business development manager. And then in 2009 was asked to step into the ownership group as the first female, first marketing professional at the table. And I continued to buy into ownership at this engineering firm and owned about 25% of the company with two other men, and they were engineers, and it was quite a ride. I just sold my shares in January of 2018 to launch Point North, which is a strategic communication and leadership development firm, and I thought I was going to run as fast as possible away from construction and engineering, and it turns out that I actually love everything about infrastructure, and having the ability to be involved in SMPS and go through the CPSM maybe 15 years ago, what we do is so important. All of our economy thrives because of land development and energy work and public works, all of the things that build communities. And so it's been really fun to reconnect with what I've known for so long. And I wanted to talk a little bit about what does it mean to be a marketer and a business developer and a leader. And so I thought, let's start from the very beginning. What is leadership all about?
So ladies and gentlemen, at 10 we talk a lot about leadership and how to make a movement. So let's watch a movement happen, start to finish, in under 3 minutes and dissect some lessons from it. First, of course you know, a leader needs the guts to stand out and be ridiculed. But what's doing is so easy to follow. So here's his first follower with a crucial role. He's going to show everyone else how to follow. Now notice that the leader embraces him as an equal. not the leader anymore. It's about him. Now, there he's calling to his friends. And if you notice that the first follower is actually an underestimated form of leadership in itself. It takes guts to stand out like that. The first follower is what transforms a lone nut into a leader. And here comes the second follower. Now, remember, it's not two nuts, three is a crowd, and the crowd is news. So the movement must be public. It's important to show not just the leader, but the followers, because you find that new followers emulate the followers, not the leader. Now here come two more people, and immediately after, three more people. Now we've got momentum. This is the tipping point. Now we've got a movement. So, notice that as more people join in, it's less risky. So those that were sitting on the fence before now have no reason not to. They won't stand out, but they will be part of the in crowd if they hurry. So, over the next minute, you'll see all of the those that prefer to stick with the crowd, because eventually they will be ridiculed for not joining in. And that's how you make a movement. But let's recap some lessons from this. So first, if you are the type, like the shirtless dancing guy, that is standing alone, remember the importance of nurturing your first few followers as equals. So it's clearly about the movement, not you. Okay, but we might have missed a real lesson here. The biggest lesson, if you noticed, did you catch it? Is that leadership is over-glorified. That yes, it was the shirtless guy who was first, and he'll get all the credit, but it was really the first follower that transformed the lone nut into a leader. So as we're told that we should all be leaders, that we're really ineffective. If you really care about starting a movement, have the courage to follow and show others how to follow. And when you find a lone nut doing something great, have the guts to be the first one to stand up and join in. And what a perfect place to do that, Ted. Thanks.
So who was the leader? The first guy that did the dance, or the second one that said that he was going to follow? Both. Right. I think that it's important as we define what is leadership. While it is a process whereby an individual influences a group of individuals to achieve a common goal, you cannot be a leader unless you have followers. And the big idea, which I'm sure that many of you are already familiar with, is you do not have to have a title or a position to be a leader. And I think that is a great example of how leadership just evolves naturally. So I think there's oftentimes some confusion around management versus leadership. Management is order and consistency, and leadership is change and movement, which is what you saw in that TED clip. So I want you to take a look at, some of you have worksheets. If you don't have one, then I'm hoping you can share with someone else. Harvard Business Review did a study, and they looked at 192 different leaders in 30 different global organizations, 15 different countries, and they asked the questions, how would you prioritize? What are the #1 competencies or attributes for leadership? Now, I've kind of given you what I think some of those are, but they took a list of 74 different attributes and they narrowed it down to 15. And then I'm going to tell you what those are, but what I'd love for you to do, because it's really not going to be very fun if I talk to you for a full hour. So pick a partner at your table, and why don't you have a quick conversation about what are the attributes that you think are important to leadership. So you get to talk. Go ahead.
Got it.
Of leadership were, and I've shared a few up here. I believe that it starts with character, heart, and commitment, and I am a communications person, so I think all of this relies on communication. But here's what HBR said. They said that the results of their study was 67% of all leaders believe that the number one area that leaders must possess is a high ethical and moral standard. So, I'm curious, can you guys list some of the attributes that you came up with? What were a few of them? Just throw them out.
Integrity.
Integrity. Excellent.
Empathy.
Empathy. What else?
Humility.
Humility.
Passion.
Passion. None of this is technical competence. None of what you threw out was capable of doing a proposal in Word or InDesign. And I think that's the point, right? We follow leaders who we feel we can trust and we can build trust with. So now I'm going to have you do another exercise, 2 minutes. I want you to think about leaders. They can be leaders that you work with. They can be leaders that you see on the national stage or international stage. But write down 5 leaders. Have a quick conversation with a partner. Maybe choose someone that you weren't visiting with last time. So list 5 leaders on your worksheet. That's okay. Or use the same people. of when you think of leaders? Oprah, Ellen, Obama. Who else? Other leaders that you can think of. Mother Teresa, great. Mandela. Ellen, yes. Okay. Is Hitler a leader?
Yeah.
Everyone on this slide is a leader. We all lead in different ways, and not everyone agrees that necessarily they're effective leaders, but they're all leaders. One of the ways in which you can define your own leadership is around looking at, are there leaders that you can see around you or maybe on a larger stage that you don't want to replicate their behaviors. So when I first started my career, I was working for a woman who you literally would touch the door and not sure what would be on the other side. It might be a day that we decide to all go out as a team and have lunch, or it might be a day where there's a lot of yelling that happens in the organization. So leadership can be toxic as much as it can be positive.
Are you really a leader though if you use fear as the main motivator?
We've seen it effective, yeah.
Well, and you get people to follow, but
Yeah.
where is fear a part of the leadership defining characteristics?
That is a great comment. So it is an effective way to lead. It may not be the most effective long term. Hitler wasn't successful long term, but he was successful during the time in which he was in power because he utilized fear.
Well, I guess I would say, yes, he had followers, but I struggle. There are 2 of them up there that I would struggle.
Now, it's not about shaming, I'm not about preaching, so. Okay, so.
I just think that their primary access to power was using fear-mongering, and
Absolutely.
I don't think that that's real leadership.
I agree. So here's my but-um-bump, right? So I believe leadership is about ethics and about doing the right thing. But fundamentally, we don't all have the same definition of what do the right thing means. And so we're going to get into that a little bit. But leadership can be both positive and it can be negative. So there's another hand. Somewhere, maybe? Okay. Oh.
Can I just ask for a point of clarification? Like, what was the HBR statistic that number 1 was leaders in ethics? How did they define that so it wasn't Hitler?
So they had a whole list, right, of 74 different competencies.
How did they define it?
They defined it as, well, let me read it exactly so that I can. High ethical and moral standards.
Right, but I guess that was when it came up. My first question was, well, what about Hitler? He didn't have high enough ethical and moral standards, right? Or is that over?
Okay, so let me share with you what I believe to be the difference between ethics and morals, which, again, HBR lumped those 2 things together. I believe morals are about culture and they're about community and they are shared among people that have common understanding. Like, for instance, in my area in Southwest Washington, we are really all about Vancouver, USA, and we share that value. And if you say that you're from Portland, Oregon, across the river, it's almost like, oh my gosh, you're not part of us. There's kind of a moral code. Now, I would say that ethics are right and wrong. They're black and white. But here's the thing. Not everybody understands a shared, not everyone agrees to maybe even the definition of honesty, which we're going to talk about. But honesty to me is pretty clear, right? Do not lie. Well, is that the same for everyone? I teach a class at Portland State University on strategic communications. And what I had the students do is a value sort, which I'm going to have you guys do too. And I had several students, probably 5 of them, that posted, well, they were all supposed to post their results. The first 5 posts, and they're like, everyone's going to have honesty as their number 1 most important value. Half the class didn't even have honesty among the first 2 or 3 tiers. And it was because I didn't give them a definition either. So then when I gave them a definition, do not lie, then, oh yeah, we all agree. But there's a shared assumption around when we use words that are values-oriented, ethics and morals. People continually use them interchangeably, and they're not the same. So now, how did people look at that? I don't know, because they did lump them together. But I do find it fascinating that it became number one among all those. Yes?
But also it's according to his followers, like what he was doing was the right thing. So it's really about what, what the followers think is right and wrong.
Well, and morally, the law in Germany allowed him to do what he did.
Yeah, exactly. So it's
You might not know that, but that is the case. At that moment, he had the power and the ability to do that. So morally, was he correct, and ethically, was he not? Oh, I think we all have opinions on that.
I think what I'm going to say is a slightly different way of stating what you said before. Leadership does not have to be a positive thing.
Right.
We want it to be, it can be. Just like passion. Passion, we think is a great thing. Hitler had passion. 45 were there. He's got passion. You may not like it. You may not think it's ethical or whatever. So I think that's, so yeah, Hitler was a leader. There's no question about it. He motivated all sorts of people to do crazy things. That's not leadership. I don't know what it is.
It's not leadership in the way in which I hope that you leave this session.
But it is.
Believe me. But it is. Right. So, here's the thing. As leaders, no matter where you are, what your title is, what your position is, there's always a lot of stress that makes our jobs as marketers and business developers difficult. And I just listed a few up here, but there are a lot of things that are affecting how we do our jobs, including maybe even the differences in shared communication and shared understanding. So we've already talked about when we use a word, we think everyone understands what that same word is. Well, combine that with a marketer and an engineer, and trying to get everyone to say and mean the same things is sometimes difficult. This is a picture of my little one, who is not that age anymore. When we think about the stresses that are on business development professionals, I hated our company picnic, which everyone was like, I don't understand, like, why don't you want to go to the company picnic? I dreaded it every summer. And here's why I dreaded it. Because I would see the children of the families that worked for our company, and that would be even more mouths to feed. So in business development, what we do is we are out trying to bring in work to keep those that are our employees busy. And it's a constant balance, right? Do we have enough work? We have too much work. Don't go out and chase any more new work. We need work right now, or otherwise we're going to have to lay people off. Now, I come from a firm where we had 200 employees, which translated to about 600 lives that were dependent on making sure that we got this right, that we kept enough work in at the right time. And so I would take that very personally and wouldn't always share my best self when I was at work, because I had put on myself all these expectations. And I suspect there's a few of you out there that might do that yourselves. And I think when we don't show up our best, then we lack some vision, we lack alignment with our values, and we might not bring our best voice, which is really what I'm hoping to share a little bit with you. So there's some squeezy stress balls on the table in case, as we go through this, we just had a discussion about Hitler, so you might need to, squeeze that stress out. So the last speaker that was in here talked a little bit about fight, freeze, and flight. And the only reason that I'm bringing it up here is because I do think that we all have different reactions when we're under stress. And we all have different things that cause us stress. Proposal deadlines are stressful. They're not any sort of negotiated timelines. They are timelines that someone gives you. And often, they're overlaid with multiple other proposals that are due at the same time. And despite our best effort to give proposal deadlines internally, those aren't always maintained, which may cause a bit of adrenaline and some stress. And so I think it's important to understand and remain self-aware. What do you do in stress? And it might be a different reaction than someone else. I do a whole brain thinking model. There's all these leadership assessments out there, but the one that we use at Point North is around how do you show up every day, and then it's overlaid with how do you show up under stress. So it's a 4-quadrant, what how, who, and why. And the way I like to show up is about people. How is it going to affect people, and how will they respond? My engineer partners showed up data. So we were constantly, like, I'm like, no, employees won't like that. Show me the dollars, you know, I mean, and it was very charts and graphs. You had to learn to be able to speak differently. But when we overlaid stress, oh my gosh. So I told you that I had 2 other partners. I had one that froze and one that flew, and you can imagine that I was in the fight. And it became a bit lonely because I'm the one that feels like I'm, you know, SWAT teaming the situation. But I also found that it didn't put me in my best caring self. So I think it's important to recognize, do you duck and cover? Do you stand back when there's conflict or when there's stress that shows up? Do you engage and maybe pull out the boxing gloves and maybe you could take a beat before you engage in a conversation? Or do you just kind of tune out and you leave the room because it's easier not to deal with it? We had a situation where it was during the recession, so 2007, for those of you that are in the engineering side, the recession hit us much earlier. So in 2006, I did our first layoffs, where the rest of the country wasn't really feeling it to maybe 2007, 2008. And at the time, we had an opportunity to go after Pacificor, which in our little area was a pretty big deal. And we hadn't gotten into the energy market at all. We had been all residential land development. And so I was determined, like, this is our entry into energy. And we had one small win that ended up being a really big one into energy. We just had to translate how construction management for home building is similar, right, to hydropower dams. Piece of cake, just the same. And I had gone to all the partners. So I was a manager at the time. I wasn't an owner. And I called everyone together. We had 2 weeks to respond because the bid had been out for a month, and I happened to get someone to answer the phone and say, oh, actually, we're in the process of doing an RFP. Would you like to be added? Yes, I'd love to be added. When does it due? 2 weeks. Piece of cake. So we sit in this room, and I had 2 partners that said, no way. We are not going after that proposal. We're not going to win. And there was a saying in our office that we eat wax. We're eating wax right now, which is referring to, in Vancouver, Washington, we have Fort Vancouver, and 100 years ago, when they didn't have enough food, they would eat the wax, the candle wax for food. And so my partner, well, they weren't partners at the time, they're looking at me and they're saying, we're eating wax and you're asking us to take a risk to do something that we really shouldn't be involved in. I had 2 other partners that just sat there and they like literally like back and forth, like watching the conversation, not wanting to engage at all. And I had just one partner who said, I'm with Lisa, let's do it. Turned out to be well, let me give you some context. So we were a $6 million firm. It was a $200,000 contract. We won, but within 3 to 6 months, it became a $6 million contract. So the size of our whole entire firm. But it meant that I had to use my voice effectively, and what I had found at that point was stomping my feet and yelling louder wasn't getting the job done. And I had to figure out how do I connect in order to get them to be in an alliance with me to go after something like that. But it means you really have to be at that table, and you can't just be frozen when a conflict happens. So this is really important to be self-aware around how do I engage when there is stress and how do I bring that voice to the rest of my team. So I told you, I think that leadership tomorrow is about 3 key areas. It's about vision. What is your vision for the future? And that's your own personal vision, but then it's also how you translate it within your organization. Vision statements are aspirational, and there's always that debate. What's a vision statement versus a mission statement? Mission is today, vision is tomorrow. So I really am encouraging you to spend a little time determining what is your vision for what you want your life to be. I shared with you that I have a degree in political science and one in public relations and one in organizational leadership. And I was doing marketing and business development. So I don't know how many. I have, met a few that have said I kind of fell into this. Like, I didn't go to school to be in business development for a construction company, or I didn't go to school to do this. But we found that we've connected in the design field or in the construction field, and it's important that we don't get to the end of this and look back and go, how did I get here? And I did a little bit of that. And so I really am encouraging, I think it's so important to spend time recognizing and understanding what it is that you want your life to be and whether or not that aligns with the organization that you're with and the position that you're in. Not that I'm telling you to leave your positions, I'm just saying make sure that those are aligned, because I think they can be really powerful when you have a strong vision. And vision should just be something that's short, not something that is really lengthy. Otherwise, you're going to forget it as much as your organization might. So I want to spend a little bit of time on values, because I think we've already talked a little bit about this, and I want to share a little bit about why our company is Point North. So it is about an ethical compass pointing north. And it's really about trying to find ways that we engage in conversations around ethics and around doing the right thing, which tends to be perceived as being kind of preachy, kind of lectury, which is not at all what it's meant to be. And so what we really are hoping to do is have organizations, individuals, and teams look at what it is that you value and how that combines to create shared value. So on your tables, you should have a little deck of cards, and you might want to do this with a couple other people, because I don't know that we have enough for everyone. What I do want to tell you is that we have this online, and you can also do it online, and you can fill it in, and then it allows you to do this. But here's what I want you to do. So I want you to take a look at the cards, and they have definitions. Now, there are the definitions that we think are the definition to those words, but there could be some debate around that. So we chose 30, and this is a project that we worked with the Good Project on, so I don't know if you're familiar with that. They're out of Boston, and what the intent of this is to simply go through the process of prioritization. So here's the directions. There are 30 cards. Each one equals a value. So as you lay the cards out, the intent of this is to create your top 4. So these are your most important values. And then, after you have shown what is the most important value, then you're going to do 6 cards that are more important values. Then you're going to do 10 cards, which are neutral. So I'm kind of neutral on this. And I thought I was going to have a whiteboard, but I don't. So we're going to go 6, 4, 6, 10. Then you're going to do 6 that are least important, and 4 that are less important. What? So we had a... Okay, because I just gave you a ton of directions, like pat your head, jump on one foot. 4, just do 4. What are your 4 most important? It's meant to be challenging. if you want to go beyond, 4 is for the most important values. 6 is the second tier, so you would be able to do like 5 different columns. And I would love it if you got on our website and did it, because we're logging all that information to try and create some statistics around what everyone is valuing. So probably 2 more minutes. Four, 6, and then 10 that are neutral. And then you would do 6 that are less, and 4 that are neutral. Okay, so it was a little aggressive to think we'd get this all done during my 1 hour with you, but the rhythm is 4, 6, 10, 6, 4. Sometimes it's easier to do the 4 most important and the 4 least important, and then you build from there. 10 is neutral. Maybe just throw them out. What were some of the top 4?
Authenticity.
Empathy, curiosity, authenticity, character, courage, passion, balance. Is there balance with marketers and work? So here's the thing. This is the big conclusion. There is no right or wrong. It is about you reinforcing, because we all have values. You all had values before you walked in here. They might be the 30 that I put on the table for you. They might be different. But making sure that your vision aligns with your values, because there are moments where you may be tested on those values, and if you haven't clearly defined them or reinforced them recently, it becomes harder to talk about. Now, here's the other thing that I'm going to add to this. If you haven't had a conversation with your team about values, it's like the least area to talk about. Everyone focuses on mission and vision and strategic plans and business plans, and values are the thing that might be on the wall. We had an HR consultant that came into our office. We had 5 different offices, and we had on the wall lots of words, maybe too many words because you couldn't remember what the values necessarily were. And so the consultant closed the door, and all my partners are in the room, all of our management team, we had like 30 people. And he said, who can name what's on the wall, the biggest few words? No one could name what was on the wall. We had all been in the rebranding, we had all gone through the personas and the brand totem, and none of us could name it. And it was lead by doing right. It's so important that if you have values, you're having a conversation with others about those values. So on Tuesday, I just facilitated in our little area, the Kelso School District's getting 2 new schools, and they haven't gotten 2 new schools for 45, 50 years. And it's a GCCM process. So I had the general contractor, I had the school district, the architect, and the owner's rep, all 4 different organizations. We spent a couple days going through a construction partnering agreement, and the biggest conversation was around values. Because we had to make sure that we all shared the same values, and we named them, and we all agreed to what it meant. We have our project charter, and it got a little dicey towards the end because there was some conflict about the architect's schedule and the contractor wanted to go to bid. And the conversation around that was very much in line with holding up the partnering agreement and saying, this is probably not communicating openly with a commitment to curiosity. Are you listening to hear and understand, or are you listening to respond to me? And we had this great moment where I wasn't sure exactly how it was going to go, but they had already had the conversation before the conflict started to happen. And that's the best time to have the conversation because we all make assumptions. We understand when we say ethics and morals, and we all agree that they're the same. So one other thing that I want to say about the value sort that's been really helpful for me is recognizing that failure is one of the best ways that we can all learn. And we have to reflect those failures. So in my last position, I was the COO, and I had like one really important job every Thursday. So we had construction managers out in the field, and they were doing reimbursements. And all I had to do was go in by 4 p.m. and approve the reimbursement. So they went out on ACH. And one particular Thursday, which wasn't because I was stressed or because I was under a deadline, I just completely spaced it out. Went home, showed up the next morning with a hot cup of coffee. I'm walking in and I'm hearing like some grumbling. Oh, the crews are mad. And I'm kind of like, I wonder what's going on there. Go sit down in my office, and then there's all this whispering. Then one person comes in and they said, has anybody told you? Like, told me what? You know, and I'm thinking like there's something positive going on. Yeah, did you process the ACH yesterday? And then just pure panic. No, I did not. And it's, for some of our construction managers, it is thousands of dollars because they've been out, they've been doing multiple things, and they had to have it processed. So, let me mention, Monday was a bank holiday. So this is Friday morning, Monday's a bank holiday, and I have boots on the ground in 8 different states. So how am I going to get them their money that I owe them? And a lot of them I don't know. So what I proceeded to do for the next 8 hours was call every single person. And what ensued from these calls was the absolute best connection I have ever had with them. So not only did I send out an email and say, here are your 3 options, I can try and find a way to meet you over the weekend and write you a check. I can do an ACH deposit that'll get in your bank account on Tuesday, or I can wire you money so that you have it tomorrow. I got no one who took me up on wiring money or delivering any money to them. But what I heard was stories about what they're doing out in the field. And I heard them say things like, I've never had a senior leader admit that they made a mistake. This is the first time ever. So if you are living those values, which is really hard to do, I'm not telling you that when you do this value sort and you go, well, this is who I am and this is how I live it, that it's always easy. It isn't. But I think it's those moments where we go, okay, what do I do? I am a transparent and honest person. I gotta call it out and I gotta tell everyone it's totally my fault I made a mistake. Because then everyone that was whispering in the accounting crew all went, oh, she didn't throw us under the bus, right? She didn't say it was an accounting error. Because it wasn't. They did their job, it was my job. So just a story to share with you that sometimes the values make it hard. Voice. So this is kind of the last element because I know we are getting close to the end of the session and the candy might be wearing off. So Giving voice to values is actually a framework that I like to give credit where credit's due. So I did not come up with this. Mary Gentile, who is back at Rutgers, came up with this framework. And really what it is about is, how do I use my voice to share my values and not do it in a way that makes anyone feel bad because we don't have the same values. And so I think it's really important to always make sure that you are testing out what those values look like. So if you flip your worksheet over, there are a couple questions, and I'd like you to spend just a couple minutes on those questions. But the first question is around, can you think of a time where your values conflicted with what you were expected to do in a particularly non-trivial management decision, and you spoke up and acted to resolve the conflict? And then the opposite. Can you think of a time where, again, non-trivial, because most of the time values come up and they're just a little bit of that underlying a situation when truly that might be the biggest part of the issue. Maybe you didn't speak up. So this is something that, kind of think for a minute about this and take it with you. The point of this is for you to think about, were there times when you spoke up and how did that work? How did it feel? What do you think about that? How did people respond to you? And then those times when you didn't and you might regret not having said something. And how important it is to be able to find your voice to speak up and to say something. So maybe just take a look at those questions real quick. Does anybody want to share anything?
It wouldn't necessarily go against my values, but we had a graphic designer send out something for our people here in Hawaii, and it was against the brand. And I had just gotten back from vacation, and our graphic designers are meant to be like our brand ambassadors. And it was a really, something about it seemed disrespectful to me, because it was just like a really annoying Hawaiian print on something that could have been a lot more profound. And it was like we were reducing our Hawaiian employees to a tropical print. And no one responded to the email. And I didn't realize that there had been so many whispers, because again, I was out on vacation, and I came back and said, this doesn't look like our brand. Since when are we allowed to use Hawaiian print on something? And I just kept getting pinged over and over again, like, oh my God, I can't believe you said that. You're spot on, but like no one had said anything for 48 hours. And it did feel good. And my boss came over and was like, oh, ho, ho, you did it.
Well, yes, you did. So I would say that is in line with values, because it's probably about inclusion and sensitivity and recognizing how culture plays a role in our organization and how to be respectful of that. So, and that's a great example because you had all those people who said, thank you for speaking up. I agree. Anybody else want to share anything?
Without getting specifics, for me, the positive and the negative were both different sides of the same coin of participating or not participating in the movement. And that gets the culture of an organization, and when you either resist against that for good or don't for evil.
Right. So I'll share a little bit without naming names, because I think some of you will get this story, but there was some groupthink that happened in an organization that I worked with that became about leveling budgets, which is something that was just part of a culture. And how do you break a culture when you have no idea that that's even going on? But budget leveling is dishonest at its core. But when the justification is, well, but you know, we do it both ways, federal government, private residential, land developers, it doesn't matter. At the core, it's about being dishonest. Put your time where your time goes. That is a critical moment where groupthink in this organization just prevailed because everyone thought that was the culture. So what is so important about values is ensuring that you understand the organizational culture, which is like the rhythm of an organization. Like the things that aren't necessarily said might not be on the wall, but y'all kind of know is existing within an organization. That if we aren't deliberate about saying this is our organizational values, then there can be those moments where you're looking at each other thinking, really? How could this have happened? It's gone on for this long. And so there's some scary moments that can happen if we aren't really spending time talking about values and then giving people the courage to speak up. So does your organization value someone saying something? Because if it doesn't, then it really is not a safe environment, right? So the last speaker that was here was talking about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and safety is like the first thing. So if there's fear, Hitler, then I'm probably not going to speak up. But isn't that the moment where you want to be the second person that was there dancing, the one that starts the movement, the one that says, no, actually, this isn't acceptable, but you have to be able to be comfortable and confident and communicate clearly that you have an issue with what's happening. And what I have found is there are not a lot of firms that have a marketer in an ownership position, which I think a firm is always better by having a diversity of perspective, including the team or the team leader who is bringing in the work, which is what the whole thing's all about, right? We might be an engineering firm, but we're a business first. And I would encourage you that if you are not sitting at the table, to invite yourself, because I haven't often seen a lot of invitations, not because someone wasn't trying to invite me, but because they just didn't think about it. And if you're not there and you're not actively involved in the conversation, you won't even be able to use your voice. So it's really important that you find ways to make sure that you're in the conversations that matter. So I am going to kind of wrap up here a little bit. Like I said, I know that candy's not wearing off. So I would say that, you know, it's super important to kind of think about how are you leading. And I absolutely believe that everyone in this room is currently leading. You have followers. You have members of an organization, whether it be at home, at church, in your firm, that are following you. And being able to, as a leader, to concentrate on being clear about what your vision is, what your values are, and how you're using your voice effectively is so important. There is a PhD, Dr. Marilee Adams, who does a map. It's a questions map. And the last speaker that was in here talked about the power of using questions, and we practiced it a little bit. She has 3 questions that I think are so important and that I try to remember often, which is, what assumptions am I making? How else can I think about this? And what is the other person thinking, feeling, and wanting? So if I am stopping to not think about what I need out of a conversation or what I need from that person, and I am instead flipping it to say, what is it that you need? What assumptions am I making? Assumptions being, do we all understand and share the same definitions of certain words? And then what can I do to understand how you think and you feel and what you want? So with that, the after lunch presentation is always a tough one, so I am happy to answer any questions. There's some additional candy bars, which I'm not taking on the airplane home, so please help yourself. I appreciate your time today. Mahalo.
All right, thank you very much, Lisa. Thank you so much for your presentation. Everybody, please fill out an evaluation form and leave them on the table for me, and we'll pick them up. And again, thank you. Is a question there?
Yeah. You can take the cards if you want. You can take the cards if you want. Yeah.